Good evening, Xavier basketball fans. The RaGing X Report is on the air, and I am your host, Jim Reeker. Musketeers now stand at 7-1. They picked up a win over Lipscomb in the past week. They did drop out of the national rankings this week, coming in, if you count down, I think 27th, 28th in the AP and the coaches poll. But let's get our super analyst Bill Gabriel in here and start talking about Xavier basketball. How you doing tonight, Bill?
I'm good, Jim. How are you?
I'm great. A little cold, but it is that time of the year. December's hit, and basketball going to get serious here. Let's take a look at the Musketeers, just where they stand right now, look at some overall stats and get your take on that. Let's look at team stats first. Field goal percentage, 43%, three-point percentage, 28.5%, free throw percentage, 66.7%, and averaging 14.8, almost 15 turnovers a game. What's your take on those team stats? Are they where you'd like to see them, or where would you like to see them going forward?
I think they're, as a team, I'd like to see them shooting a bit better from the three-point line. They got some guys who are really struggling out there right now, and that's not helping the overall team percentage. And then I'd like to see them cut into that turnover number and get that down to where their average is around 10 a game. I think that would be, and that'll give them a nice little stretch of some low turnover games if they can do that. And I think that would really help them be much more effective on the offensive end if they can cut that turnover down a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's one of the keys that Travis Steele would like to see. He talks about 11. I like it a little bit lower, 9 or 10 would help me. The other night in the game, they seemed to. We'll get to that, but they had a lot very early. They kind of settled down. Free throw percentage close to 70. We'd like to see it at 70. A couple guys, I think Zach or Jason Carter's shooting well over 80%. The one that I did see is kind of struggling right now is Tyreek Jones. He's down in the 50s, and especially because we know Tyreek's going to get fouled a lot underneath. I'd like to see him at least get that maybe into the 60s or mid-60s.
Right.
Let's look at personal stats. Paul Scruggs, 15.3 points. Najee Marshall, 14.4. And Tyreek at 14.3. Are those the three you expect to be leading this team at this point and going forward?
Oh, I think if those three guys aren't their leading scorers on average and in games for the most part, they're in trouble. I think they need a solid, 14, 15-point outing from each one of those guys on a pretty consistent basis. Because I think the rest of the team kind of will feed off of that, and that really helps them out. That being said, Tyreek is being real efficient with his scoring. I think he's at 54% for a shooting average, which is not bad. Considering he's a post player and he hasn't really taken all that many jump shots, or he hasn't even attempted a three-pointer this year. I'd like to see that be closer to 60%, considering he's taken the most part a lot of high-quality shots down low. And get that free throw percentage up would be he'd get a nice little roll on at the free throw line would be good. But yeah, I think those three guys definitely have to be their leading scorers.
And kind of a surprise, Zach Freemantle, averaging a little over 7 points a game and almost 4 rebounds. And the key there, freshman, has to be one of the most impressive freshmen we've seen come along for the Musketeers in a while, and he's only playing about 16 minutes a game. So those are really good numbers for that time in each game.
Oh yeah, he's and he's a pretty good free throw shooter too. I think he's around 81%. So, and then his, he's put together some nice. I know he picked up a lot of blocks the other night, and probably doubled his total because I think he had 5, and he's now got a total of 10. So he is providing some presence in the paint, which is good to see from a freshman big man. And he's he's got a nice frame, and he's boxing out and doing some good things down there for the Muskies.
Yeah, and you look, if you combine Tyreek and Zach together, they're pretty much they would average in 42 minutes a game. But put their points together, they're getting 21 points out of that position and almost 13 rebounds. That's great production from that position. And the other thing, we always worried about Tyreek, and seems like he's playing better defense maybe. He's not fouling as much as he was. We always worried about him getting in foul trouble. We haven't seen that much this year.
Oh no, he's done a great job not picking up the silly ticky-tacky fouls. I think most of the fouls he's picked up this year have been of the I'm going to go ahead and whack you so you don't get a layup variety, which are the good kind of fouls. But yeah, he's not picking up those away from the basket fouls at nearly the same rate he was in previous years. So that's really helping him be on the floor and being real productive down low for the Muskies.
And then the time distribution, Scruggs and Marshall averaging about 34 minutes a game. Again, Tyreek at 26, Zach at 16, Jason Carter about 28 minutes a game, and Quentin Gooden 28 minutes a game. Those numbers that we like to see at that time, are those good numbers at this point in the season? They went about 10-11 deep the other night against Lipscomb. Can they continue to do that, or do you see this maybe being pared down to a 8-9-man rotation?
I would say that when it's big games, Big East games, like probably not Wednesday night, but Saturday, you're going to see a max maybe 9. I can't see it getting any deeper than that, unless a game gets out of hand and they're subbing a little bit more liberally. But yeah, if it's a tight game, I can't see them getting super deep into that bench. I think you're looking. They're playing about 8 guys consistently, and then you're going to see Kiki Tandy start picking up some minutes. And I think if he plays well, what you're going to see is Quentin Gooden's minutes go down. He is going to be the person whose playing time suffers if Kiki starts playing better, and it's just because he's not playing great. When you're talking about free throw percentage, his is only 44%, and he's a starting point guard. He's got 22 assists and 16 turnovers. He's only shooting in the 30%, 33% from the three-pointer, and 31.5% from the floor. Those are not great numbers for your starting point guard. So either he's going to have to pick his game up to keep out on the floor, or if Kiki starts playing well, as he starts acclimating, you're going to see him start snipping away at minutes from Quentin. And that'll put him about 9 guys.
All right, let's talk about the Lipscomb game the other night, 87-62 victory by the Musketeers over the Bison. What were your takeaways from that game?
I just thought that was another, and I think just looking ahead to Green Bay on Wednesday, they're going to be in the same boat. It's a team that can't compete with them in the paint, and they're going to pound it in, and their big guys are going to feast, and everybody else is going to play off of that inside-out play. Obviously, Tyreek, Zach Freeman had great games there against Lipscomb, so I look for them to do that same approach whenever they can, because that works for them.
And Kiki Tandy got in, looked a little rusty, but hit a couple shots. We hear he's the best shooter on the team. Was that good to see Kiki out there? You think that's going to help the team?
Oh, I definitely think it's going to help them. I think, anytime you can add a guy who's athletic and can, shoot, and once he gets comfortable, so it's just a matter of how long that takes. I kind of thought we'd start to see Demir Bishop get comfortable by now, and he doesn't seem like he's kind of there defensively, I think. Offensively, he's not there yet, so hopefully Kiki maybe gets more comfortable offensively, and his defense may be the thing that he struggles with as a freshman, because they're going to struggle with something. But yeah, I think he definitely gives them a boost, just because they can rotate him in and get some guys some breaks and take a minute or two off of how much Scruggs and Najee are out there, or Clinton, and he picks up a few minutes from them, and they get a little extra rest and refresher at the end of the game. Wouldn't be a bad thing to have happen.
Yeah, and a couple other takes from that game. Zach Freeman, he had 15 points, 5 rebounds, only 15 minutes as he fouled out. Now, part of that, I believe, was due to the big man for the Bison, Hassan Azadullah, who had 18 points and 9 rebounds, but he was a man. And he kind of schooled Zach a few times down low, and I think that led to his foul total and fouling out of the game fairly early on. Another Quentin Gooden, again, Kiki Tandy is now on the floor. He's now available, maybe a little bit rusty, but I like the game that Quentin played. 7 points, no turnovers. Hit a wide-open three-point shot. That's what we'd like to see Quentin do, set his feet, knock it down, had a couple nice drives to the basket. But, again, that no turnovers. If he can get that turnovers down, get those assists up a little bit, I think that's where we need to see Quentin. And, again, maybe Kiki in his rearview mirror will help motivate him to stay focused on doing the things he needs to do. And I got to point out a guy that we watched for a year and a half now, just wondering, Donterius James. He played 11 minutes and had 5 rebounds, and I think he had 2 points. He got a rebound, put one back at the end of the game. But just have to, he seems to keep a good attitude. He's ready to play hard when he's ready to play. And actually, Coach Steele mentioned him in the post game that he keeps coming to practice, and he practices hard, and he forces him to play. So you got to like to see the development of James. Let's move forward into tomorrow's game, the Green Bay Phoenix out of the Horizon League. What do we expect to see from the Phoenix?
Well, they're currently 3-4. Their 3 wins have come at the mercy of UW Stout, the CSUN, California State University Northridge, I think it is, or Northridge, I can't remember, one of the two, and Montana State. So they haven't. They've been in some games with a couple Big Ten teams. I think they played Purdue and Wisconsin and lost to them. Played them tough, half, but it was the different half for each team. Played Purdue a little tougher in the first half, played Wisconsin a little tougher in the second half. So I think, it's definitely a team that was picked to finish fifth in their conference, and that's the Horizon League, the same league as NKU, who I believe was picked to finish third. So it's pretty solid conference for, it's a lot of good basketball in there. They feature a freshman, Amari Davis, who's a 6'3" guard from Trotwood, Madison, Ohio, up near Dayton, Trotwood, and he is averaging 16.3 points a game, and has very few three-point attempts. So he must be a attack the basket, slashing kind of player. And then their next four leading scorers, Jaquan McLeod is a guard at 6'2", 14, almost 15 points a game. PJ Pipes, almost 12 points a game. Cody Schwartz, 10 points a game. Cameron Hankerson, almost 10 points a game. And McLeod shoots about 34% from three, and the remaining three guys I mentioned there are all shooting over 40%. So they definitely must work off the slashing of Davis, and it looks like McLeod does a little bit of that too, and the other guys just kind of hanging out, waiting for a kick out to drain a three. So they're going to have to stay home on them.
Yeah, and I just happened to catch Travis Steele's press conference today. He was asked about him, and yeah, everything you say is right on. The thing that he obviously watched a lot of film of them, and he attributed that they're considered the fastest team in America. That he said they will take the first shot they can get, and their whole game plan is to get as many possessions as possible. In fact, they put up, as far as possessions per game, they are number one in the country, so they're going to put it up a lot. I think they actually average about 83 points a game. He said the key to this game is going to be hanging with them, that transitional defense, and again, in that type of game, trying to limit the turnovers. There's probably going to be fast break chances for the Muskies, but they need to control the ball. And again, I think, as you alluded to earlier, Musketeers are going to have to take advantage where they have the advantage, and that's definitely going to be down low with Tyreek Jones and Zach Fremantle. But, yeah, they're a formidable opponent. They actually finished the year last year 21-17. They actually played in what we know as the CBI tournament and actually made it all the way to the finals of the CBI tournament. They were the runner-up in that. So a formidable opponent. Coach Steele said that they like to bring in different types of teams that play different types of ways. As he mentioned, Missouri State, which we remember played very, very slow, and Lipscomb kind of did the same thing. He said this team is a different style and it's going to give them a different test, and that's what they like in the preseason. Well, that'll be tomorrow night at the Cintas Center, I believe at the 7 p.m. tip, and we will be there. But anything else about the Phoenix and tomorrow night's game you want to mention before we move on to the main event this week?
I just hope Karam Cantor is not confused on who he needs to be rooting for in that one.
That's right. That's where he came from, wasn't it?
Yes.
That's right. So this is we can call this the Karam Cantor Bowl or shootout tomorrow night. That would be interesting. All right, Saturday night, the Crosstown Shootout, the Skyline Chili Crosstown Shootout, the game here in Cincinnati. Of course, we refer to it as just the Shootout. Will be played at 5 p.m. at the Cintas Center. We've been to many of these. My first question is, what's the best time of year for this to be played? It's actually been played real early in the season, like in November. even before Thanksgiving. We've seen several times in December. It's been during the conference, in the middle of the conference season. What's the best time for it? It falls on a big football Saturday this year round. We got all the conference championships. When's the best time for this game?
And that is a good question. I was thinking about that when from the moment I saw that on our outline for what we'd be talking about today, and I don't think you can really squeeze it into the conference slate anymore, just especially with the potential of next year having those 2 extra conference games with UConn coming in. So I think you're going to see it sometime before Christmas during this time in December. And I think that's probably a good spot for it, because I think both teams need a good, solid test of someone who, really wants to beat them. Like, it's not just a preseason game. I mean, there's enough for the rivalry that you want to win. It's almost like a conference game, from the approach standpoint and how hard it's going to be played. And I think, UC will be physical with them, and that's good because that'll prepare them for what they get in the Big East. Because they, based on what they've been through already, I think it's a good spot for it.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think this year, and again, this conference football championships, and of course, some people say those should go away, has been a new thing in the last, I'd say, decade. I would think, if not for that, then this would be the perfect weekend, or probably a weekend right before the Christmas conference season hits. It's a good test. It doesn't affect the conference schedule. When you put a rivalry game like this in the middle of the conference schedule, sometimes you can maybe emotionally take away from some of your conference games, which might lead to a loss to a conference opponent that you don't need. Just a little facts about this. The Crosstown Shootout started on March 7th, 1928 at Schmidt Fieldhouse. It was actually, I think, the dedication of Schmidt Fieldhouse, and that's why they invited the Bearcats to come play, and the Musketeers won that first game. Overall, the UC Bearcats lead the series in the 86 meetings 51-35, although the Musketeers recently have brought that a lot closer. I wouldn't say dominating, but having the edge up in the last 10 to 15 years. Last season, the game was played at UC, and the Bearcats won by a score of 62-47. 2011, we had the bench clearing brawl, kind of the height of the hype, I would say. Seems like it's toned down a little bit since 2011. I don't know, maybe it's just a change in our society and what people pay attention to. Doesn't seem like there's as much of the media clamor, whatever you want to call it, that goes on or used to go on, the hype. And maybe that's just because we watch so many different things with social media. There's not just one media outlet anymore. But what's your take on just the atmosphere around this game and the atmosphere in the town?
I think if you're a true fan of each school, it still is important to you. I think it's probably that the brawl year, and then it was at the I can't remember what they call the place now. It used to be the U.S. Bank Arena. But they moved it there for what, 2 years?
2 years, yeah, and actually took
2 years.
The shootout out of the name, called it the Crosstown Classic, because the shootout was too violent of a name for it. But obviously, I think clearer heads came through, and we went back. We're going to call it the shootout, and we can deal with that.
I think that movement, and then when it went back, I think they probably had a I think probably the two schools sat down and they may have, in a way, let it known to the media that they needed to back off of it and not build it up, just kind of treat it like any other game. And maybe that's something that came out in a positive way. I don't think it, I kind of remember what happened there with the brawl, the local on-air radio personality getting somebody from one team to say something about somebody from another team, and now you got to prove something. And that a lot of that has come to an end, I believe. So I'm not sure that they're doing that much with where they have access to the players as much anymore in interviews for this. So I think it's a good time for it. I think it's still a good game, a good test of basketball for both teams. I know. And they probably can't push it too late in December because I think they want to still do it while students are at the respective campuses. And so if they go too much later, they'll be on Christmas break.
Yeah, and I think probably a change in our society because of things like social media. I think college players are maybe being schooled a little bit more about what they say because basically they can be interviewed or put their point of view or opinion or trash talking out there anytime they want to now. And you bring up the point that it was a local media that kind of hyped that I think it was said that maybe was it Tu Holloway wouldn't even start at UC, kind of got him a little bit going, and there was some back and forth that fueled the fire. And again, I think maybe kids are a little bit smarter and don't get involved in that, especially at the major college basketball level. They've been, taught that you got to be smart what you put out there and what you say in the media and about your opponents. All right, let's look at this year's game. What do we expect from the Bearcats? New coach, so we're going to see the same, probably not the same defensive effort on their part. Maybe the tables turned a little bit as the Musketeers seem to emphasize defense a little bit more these days.
Well, I think definitely they got a different coach, but he's a pretty good coach. So I expect them to be, focusing on their strengths. And one of their strengths is Jerron Cumberland, the preseason player of the year in the AAC. And I believe that he is also on the Naismith Trophy watch list. 6'5" guard. I think he's like 220, 215. Averages like 15 points a game, 3.2 rebounds. He's their go-to guy when they need a bucket. And he's a pretty physical player. Doesn't mind taking the ball to the hoop and absorbing contact in an effort to score. And then they also bring some interesting matchups for the Muskies. They got a 7'1" center, Chris Vaught, I believe it is. He seems like he can move a little bit. He's 13.1 points per game, 7 rebounds. And then they got a couple other complimentary guards. Keith Williams, he's averaging 11.3, and then Javen Cumberland, I believe he transferred in. I want to say he's from Wilmington. And
I think he's Jerron's cousin, I believe.
And he is a very good three-point shooter. I forgot to write down his percentage, but it was pretty good. So that is what the Bearcats will bring. I'm sure that they I'm sure if they play similar to how his teams in NKU played, they will get up shots and they will get up three-point shots, because that was one thing NKU did a lot of. They were very much, if they had guys who could stroke it from the arc, they were letting it fly.
All right. And you have a prediction for the game? What are the keys for the Musketeers?
The keys for the Muskies are to obviously control the paint, control the rebounding, limit turnovers for themselves, and make turnovers for the other team. And then, obviously Cumberland's going to get his. You're going to limit him, but what you don't want to do is let everybody else play off of him. Kind of negate everyone else and keep him in check without letting him go off for like 35 or something. And then if they do that, I think that they can control the game through their defense and come out with a big W at the Cintas Center.
Yeah, and I think one stat I found that really bodes well is all of the shootouts that have been played at the Cintas Center. Xavier is 7-1 against the Bearcats at the Cintas Center, with their only loss coming in the 2001-2 season when UC beat them 75-55. So I believe that's a key. It'll be a home game. It'll be rocking. I'm sure it'll be full. The students will be back. And I look at it kind of, it's the reverse of last year. They got the new coach, and we got the home floor. And I think those two things will be hard for the Bearcats to overcome, but I think it'll be a good test for the Musketeers. And they got a few of those coming up before they jump in to the Big East. So your prediction is?
Oh, I'm going to say that it'll be 72-65.
Okay, we'll write that down and check that in next week's show. I'm not going to give you a score, but I'm kind of in the same. I'm thinking Musketeers maybe by 10, but again, I think it'll be a tough battle. Musketeers going to have to, again, I think they will control the turnovers. It seems like in big games, and the focus will be there, that they should have a good game. And seems like I heard a UC broadcast the other day, and they were lamenting the fact that there's always some Musketeer who is kind of an unsung hero who gets hot during this game. You talked about Karam Cantor. I remember his year, it seemed like he hit a bunch of three-pointers against him. I remember D. Davis having a big game against him. I remember Trayvon Blewett, not that he was not one that scored a lot, but he had like a 40-point game a few years back at UC. I think the Musketeers ended up losing that. So they were saying which Musketeer is going to get hot on Saturday. They weren't talking too positively. I guess the Bearcats haven't been playing all that well. Of course, they had their loss in the opening game at Ohio State, but then in their Paradise Jam, they didn't do so well. They lost to Bowling Green. I think they went to overtime against another opponent that Valparaiso, and then had a tough game at home against UNLV team that wasn't very highly regarded. So it seems like the Bearcats, even though they are 5-2, aren't playing their best basketball right now. But again, probably a perfect remedy for them would be to come into the Cintas Center and win the crosstown shootout. Any other observations about the shootout in Saturday's game before we move to trivia?
I was just thinking that you said that the one guy who gets hot in that one. I was just thinking this might be the game where Jason Carter for the Xavier does that. He's kind of been pretty quiet as a Musketeer, and I was kind of since we had Green Bay coming in this week. I got to thinking of Karam Cantor, and so I kind of did a little comparison of the two of them as they started their tenure at Xavier. And you remember everybody kind of thought Karam was in over his head at the beginning of the season, and boy, did he really have a nice second half of the season. And Jason Carter, in the first 8 games, Karam Cantor scored 59 points, and Jason Carter has scored 56. And I would say that there's a lot of people feeling the same way right now about Carter, that he just might not be quite ready for prime time. And I'm hoping that maybe a nice crosstown shootout for him will propel him into the conference play just like it did Karam Cantor. Had a nice solid second half of his season for the Musketeers.
Well, it's interesting you make that point because in Travis Steele's press conference today, that point was brought up that maybe Jason Carter wasn't playing up to his expected standards, and Travis Steele said that's definitely true, and said he was not happy with his performance, and they had a talk and had looked at some film, and he said Jason Carter, he said he puts so much time into his game and his shooting, and he believes he can be a scorer. He is a pretty good three-point shooter. He said they were looking at film, and he was just kind of showing him that he wasn't setting his feet or catching the ball ready to shoot. But he said that Jason Carter is in the gym every day at 8 a.m. going through his shooting routine. He says when you're a graduate student, you can have a schedule like that. But that's a good point that you make. And he said, a basket here, a basket there. The other night he missed a couple bunnies underneath the basket. He said he makes those two, and instead of 7 points, he has 11 points, and he's feeling better about himself. But he said Jason's really, really working to improve his game and be a bigger part of the team. And so, we'll have to look at that. You may be right. Maybe it'll be Jason Carter who gets hot. All right, good points. You ready for a little crosstown shootout trivia?
Sure.
Had to dig deep into the archives to come up, because I know you're so well versed on the shootout. Been to many of them, watched most of them. In 1990, there was an annual national event that is televised by all three networks locally. But in 1990, it fell on the same day as the crosstown shootout, and local TV refused to interrupt the shootout for this nationally televised event. Do you know what that was?
Ooh, 1990.
And I'll give you this hint. It was in January.
I was going to say, was it the State of the Union address?
Ding, 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 ding. You are correct. You win. Local television in 1990 refused to interrupt the crosstown shootout, which was played, I believe, on a Tuesday evening that year, and said the game was more important than the State of the Union address. I'm trying to think, 1990, that would have been President Bush 1, I believe, 92 or 90, yeah. I think that would have been George Bush the first. So,
yeah, I think so.
You are correct. All right, any following thoughts? The Musketeers' schedule is going to really ramp up. Travis Steele talked about that. They got some big tests, of course, with the Bearcats. And then they got two on the road, I believe, at TCU and at Wake Forest. But he said, those are the games that are going to get us ready for the Big East. So schedule of the Musketeers is going to get tougher. Any parting thoughts you have on the Musketeers?
Nothing I can think of, Jim.
All right. Well, we will thank my good pastor and the Grueling Truth Network for putting our broadcast out there on many platforms. We thank you for listening, and we will finish up, as we always do, by saying, go Muskies.
Go Muskies.